exercise or I express my concerns talaga with the team. Pag hindi ko to gusto or hindi ko siya maintindihan or may concerns ako, I exercise or I express my concerns with them. Talagang nagkakaroon kami ng conversation, parang ina-express namin kung ano yung mga concerns namin doon sa team, kahit lalaki sila or ako lang yung babae. I don't feel naman na parang wag na yung idea mo kasi yan lang. Sometimes mas maganda na pinag-uusapan yung mga problems doon sa inside sa team, lalo na kapag doon sa soft dev kasi doon nagka-come up yung mga concerns ninyo. Hindi siya mahirap kasi number one, lahat naman kayo professionals doon sa team. So aside from gender, you respect the person. Wala yung gender, you respect the person and then you respect each other's profession, each other's tasks and duties doon sa team. So hindi siya mahirap makipag-usap or mahirap makipag-vibe doon sa mga lalaki, doon sa team.
Anyone else from the panelists who would want to address the question? Is it hard to vibe on a male-dominated team? Does it affect the team harmony or work when the team is male-dominated?
I actually agree with Ms. Olgie. As I've said, kanina, we were only 2 women in our bootcamp team, and at first it was hard, but eventually, I believe men also have the capability to understand if you're having struggles, especially in programming, and they will help you. Some of them will, and let's not keep the fact that there really can be circumstances where your gender will be questioned in the team, where your capabilities as a woman will be questioned in the team. But if you ever encounter that kind of situation or that kind of people in the team, just know that you have to keep yourself professional at all times and deal with them privately if you must. Try not to embarrass them, but instead educate them that what being a woman doesn't have anything to do with your capability to deliver well in the team. So in my experience, in my current team, mas marami yung babae kaysa sa lalaki, and it's a really good sign. So yan lang. That's not really hard at all.
To add in to what Ms. Audrey and Ms. Senya has said, I also had some parang personal struggle when I was starting out as a project manager. So when I was a newbie, ako yung project manager, babae pa ako. Tapos yung mga devs namin, male and seniors ko pa. So there was a personal struggle in communication. So it kind of affected our teamwork kasi di ko masabi yung gusto kong sabihin. Kasi anong term, nagdadalawang isip ako kung okay lang ba sabihin ko to sa kanila kasi they were my seniors, ganyan baka ibang isipin. But I realized that you really have to have confidence in yourself and you're sure naman that you know what you're saying. So parang yun, i-assure mo lang sarili mo that you can do it. You have the enough knowledge. Then as Senya also said earlier, it's okay to ask if you don't understand. Then it's very important also to have a culture na open ang lahat na magtanong sa isa't isa to constantly improve your teamwork kasi kayo lang din naman nagtutulungan to reach a certain goal sa team ninyo. So yun.
So sa akin naman, luckily for me, hindi ko na feel yun sa team namin. We respect each other and we educate each other as well. So para sa akin, never be afraid to ask or share your thoughts.
Yeah. Kasi yung key for communication, no? Yung sharing what you think, what you want to say to your team, that would be the starting point of coming up with a harmonious relationship rather than keeping all by yourself na yung struggle mo. So, iyan yung ano. All right. So, receiving no other questions from our audience, let us now move to the second portion of the forum. This time around, the speakers will be sharing lessons learned from their practice. As said earlier, please jot down questions because the speaker will answer them right after they share. So, let me now call on Miss Audrey to share the slide. Again, to our audience, please jot down your questions to our chat box. We'll be entertaining them after Miss Audrey had said, or rather shared her experience, her thoughts.
Hello, nakikita na po ba yung screen?
Yeah.
Hi, sige. Hi, good morning everyone. Today I'll be sharing Code Igniter. It's one of the first frameworks na natutunan ko or I've learned about nung nasa college pa ako. And then still using it, one of the frameworks that I'm still using to develop some applications and then systems for clients, different clients. So for those who do not know or for those na wala pang idea, I'll give you a brief background about Code Igniter and some reasons why we should consider it when building applications. Now again, we have different frameworks. So ito lang yung ito yung pinili kong i-discuss kasi may sentimental value siya. Anyway, so let's talk about a brief background about Code Igniter. So for those who do not know or have not yet heard about Code Igniter, it's an application development framework. So yung Code Igniter, basically, it's a toolkit that you can use to develop web applications using PHP. So basically, if you're coding PHP, and then you're coding using PHP, you can obviously try to use or apply Code Igniter as an application or development framework. So yung Code Igniter then uses or supports the MVC or the Model View Controller architecture. So it basically keeps the data separately, data from the presentation flow, separate parts for easier management. So if it worries you on how to organize your files so that hindi siya masyadong mahirap to locate or to find files or to to organize your files, you can apply this framework. And for a short history, yung Code Igniter was initially released in 2006. So matagal na siya. I started using it when I was in college. I started with CI3. And then yung latest version niya, yung CI4, was released 2 years ago in 2020. So slowly nagta-transition ako from CI3 to CI4. So ayan, brief background of Code Igniter. So for this sharing, let me just share why we should consider building apps with Code Igniter. And then again, marami namang frameworks that you can try to use. Let me just share for now Code Igniter. Okay, so number one, of course, Code Igniter is free. It's an open source PHP framework that works on the development of tasks and then programming. So if you're interested in coding or programming or developing applications, you can try CI because it's free. You can easily download and then download from the given link dun sa GitHub, and then install nyo lang yung framework, unzip your downloaded file doon sa project file ninyo, or you can use Composer installation for your app starter or for if you want to add CI to your existing project. So yun lang yung kailangan yung gawin and then you're good to go. For me, what I usually do, lalo na dun sa CI4, is that I just type in the command and then mag-create na siya ng, install niya na yung mga kailangan niyang dependencies, and then after that, it will create the following files and folders. So makikita niyo, organized na siya. So hindi ka naman masyadong malilito or hindi ka na masyadong malilito where to start or where to begin with your project. So makikita mo na agad kung saan ka pwedeng mag-start dyan. Okay. So aside from CI being free, you can also use this to create or to produce project faster. So kasi yung CI number 1, it uses MVC approach. Just like the other web frameworks, gumagamit dito ng model view controller software design. So just a background of what an MVC approach is, it's a software design pattern commonly used for developing user interfaces. Dinidivide natin yung related logic, program logic into 3 interconnected elements. So imagine if you have a single file or files na nagko-contain ng business logic nyo, ang gagawin lang doon is to separate it into 3 different elements. So kung meron kang HTML designs or HTML files, from that one big file, aalisin yon, isi-separate siya, ilalagay siya sa views. So yung logic naman or yung pag-handle naman ng request, ilalagay siya sa controllers. And then yung anything that pertains to data will be put into models. So meron ka ng organization ng files. So mas madali mong hahanap kung saan mo nilagay yung HTML templates mo, saan mo nilagay yung pag-handle ng request, saan mo nilagay yung business rules about your data. Meron na siyang organization doon pa lang. And of course, if you install your CodeIgniter framework, meron ditong app folder. So meron na ditong configuration files which contains all of your configurations, your database connections, your helpers, your libraries that you can easily use kapag nagde-develop ka na ng program. So mas madali na siya. You don't need to start from scratch. Yung kailangan mo lang is to call the available helpers and then libraries to aid you with your development. So pwede mo siyang gamitin for fast project production. So whenever you create an application, you have to, yung pinaka-goal lang naman dito is you have to find a way to organize your code, to make it simple and to make it simple to locate the proper files, and of course for maintenance na din. So kapag nagkaka-error yung isang part, doon mo lang siya hahanapin. So maganda yung backtracing dito kasi organize yung mga files. And of course, ayan. So let me give you an example kung ano yung itsura. Simple example lang naman ng kung ano yung itsura or how the MVC approach works in CodeIgniter. So we have here a controller class file. We start from that. We create the controller class file. Siya yung nag-handle ng requests from the client or requests kapag gagamitan yung software. And then it basically has the siya yung nagko-control kung ano yung ilo-load ng mga views or templates, and then may kailangan bang data. If it needs the data, it calls the model. So ito yung model from lower right side, that's the model. And then it actually creates or connects with the database, yung model, and then it retrieves the data from the database or works with the data within the database. Anything that has to do with the data, it goes to the model, and then it returns the controller. So from the controller again, it calls something. If it needs data, it calls the model. The model gives back the data to the controller, and then yung controller naman nag-decide kung ano yung ilo-load niyang view. So ganun lang yung flow niya. It's actually plain and simple. Kailangan mo ng data, you go to model, model will give it back to you. Saan mo ba ibibigay yung data or ano ba yung kailangan makita ng user, i-load mo tong view. So yan yung approach ng MVC. So mas madali kang makakapag produce ng project in this case. So in our case, sa team, what we do is we actually divide tasks. For example, kung dalawa kaming programmer or dalawa kaming nagde-develop ng system, yung isa, ako muna, I usually do all of the templates, yung HTML templates ninyo, or the front-end templates, yung makikita ng user, or kung saan nag-interact yung user, I usually do that. And then some controllers na mag-load ng templates. And then one will work with the data side. So lahat ng mga data and the data flow, the business rules, yung model side, some of the controllers will be done by the other programmer or the other developer. So mas madali kaming nakakapag-develop ng system using this approach kasi may gumagawa na ng mga templates, may mga gumagawa na din ng business flow and then data manipulation. Okay, so dito din sa CI, if you're working alone, okay lang din kasi it requires you less dun sa coding. So it doesn't really need, you don't really need to type in a lot of characters kasi meron naman siyang sinusunod na builder classes or meron naman siyang sinusunod na classes that you can use to create the project. Okay, so kahit mag-isa ka lang, you can also or you can still create project faster. Let me show you an example. And let me show you an example comparison of a PHP program that handles query sa MySQL database and then versus doon sa similar query that is handled by a code igniter framework. So dito, doon sa taas, PHP program siya. So kung mas marami kang tinatype, so basically mas prone ka to create errors or kung wala man, mas mahirap mag-debug kung magkaroon man ng error. Unlike doon sa query na hinandle using Code Igniter Framework, dito kasi gumagamit ng query builder. So yung query builder para na siyang may pattern na sinusunod for us to be able to or for us to be able to create, read, or update or delete information doon sa database with minimal scripting. So pag sabi mong minimal scripting, konti na lang yung itatype mo, but you can still do the tasks that you can do kapag marami yung tinatype mo. So basically, it helps you with helps you come up with a project that's faster kahit mag-isa ka lang mag-code. So dito, sa scripting or sa query builder, it also allows for safer queries. So sa Code Igniter kasi, naturally or automatically, yung Code Igniter, yung values dito ay in-escape na or escaped by the system. So kung sa PHP ka, itatype mo or ilalagay mo pa siya doon sa RealScape string, yung mga queries mo. So it actually helps you with SQL injection prevention doon mismo sa Code Igniter. So yung CI framework, nag-offer na siya ng mga security features kung yun yung concern mo kapag nagde-develop ka ng systems or applications for clients. Okay. Ayan. So these are some of the applications, systems na na-develop namin or usually ako for using CI. So meron dyan ng product management, meron ng stocks monitoring, if you're working with a single client, small projects, napakadali mag-produce ng mga ganyang systems. Merong merong applications management system, grade management system. Ayan. So these are just sample projects in CI. Okay. And then next is, of course, learning. Learning in Code Igniter is very easy, or yung learning nito is fast and easy. So yung Code Igniter kasi is thoroughly documented siya. So you can find it in the link here. So meron na siyang very well-documented examples and source codes. Meron siyang source code na pwede nyo itry. Kung hindi nyo alam kung paano gawin, babasahin nyo ng documentation. Meron siyang different scenarios on how to come up with the output that you want. Ito ba yung gusto mo? Ito yung code dyan. Ito ba yung gusto mong mangyari? Scenario 2? Ito yung code dyan. And then how do you implement the code? Meron silang examples and then well-commented na source codes. Okay, so from start to finish, meron kang reference for your project. So if you're stuck with a certain error, pwede mo siyang hanapin doon sa documentation. And also, if you're stuck with some errors na hindi mo na talaga mahanap or maintindihan doon sa documentation, you can actually talk to people in the CI community. So meron siyang active forum for the dev community. It has thousands of users and a lot of topics that you can go to. So pwede ka mag-post dyan and then pwede ka mag-post dyan or mag-reply or basahin mo yung mga pwede mong gawin whenever you struggle doon sa mga na-encounter mo. Kung bago ka pa lang doon sa CI, mga na-encounter mong trouble or errors na hindi mo talaga mahanap. So they also talk about upcoming topics, comparison of CI to other web frameworks, ano ba yung advantages ng CI sa ibang frameworks, ano ba yung mga kulang na features, ano ba yung upcoming features na pwede mong abangan, ano ba yung mga pwede mong magamit in terms of development. So pwede nyo siyang pag-usapan doon sa forum. Okay, so lastly, let me just sum it up with the following. So again, if you're interested in coding and applications development, especially in web, you can consider Code Igniter when building projects for your clients. So if meron kang clients, tapos gusto ng web-based applications, and then wala ka masyadong alam na framework, you can consider CI kasi you can develop projects faster dahil nga doon sa mga nabanggit ko. And then, if you have too few developers in the team, konti lang kayong gagawa or ikaw lang yung gagawa, pwede mong i-consider yung CI. And then, if you're learning a new framework and if you want to learn the framework quickly, pwede mo din siyang i-consider kasi madali lang siyang mag-start. You can easily start with it. You can easily create a project with it. Actually, dun sa documentation, meron dun nakalagay na how to install and then creating your first CI project. So kung gusto mo agad makapag-aral or you just go on with it quickly, maintindihan siya, how it flows or how it works, you can consider CI as your new framework. Or kung bored ka na and then gusto mo mag-aral ng bagong framework ng mabilisan, you can consider CI. Okay, so for that, yun lang for CI, for Code Igniter.
Thank you so much, Ms. Audrey, for sharing. The space is now open for question from our audience. There is a question here from our live audience here. Yung question is, what are the types of software that are best developed with the help of Code Igniter?
Okay, yung mga web applications software, yun nga, if your client requires you or asks you to build web applications, software, mga web-based inventory system or web-based project management systems, you can consider CI doing that. Lalo na kung isa ka lang mag-program small projects with a client, dalawa lang kayo, you can consider CI for that.
Another question here from the live audience. What are the databases that is supported by Code Igniter?
I know and I use MySQL. Yung mga major databases naman supported ng MySQL. I know Postgre is also supported by MySQL. SQLite also siguro supported, and any more na databases na hindi ko nabanggit, major databases are located dun sa documentation. So if your concern is kung ano yung mga server requirements or ano yung mga requirements before starting with Code Igniter, andun siya dun sa documentation. And kasi ang dami niya eh. Basta yung Postgre and MySQL, major databases that I know and use are supported by CI.
Okay, so seeing no other questions from the chat box and from our audience here, let's now move. Thank you so much, Ms. Audrey.
Ay, ma'am, meron na
okay.
tungkol.
Meron po palang question, sorry. Yung question, which do you think, another question pa before we move to the next, what do you think is, which do you think is better, Laravel or CI, and why?
Okay, so meron talaga ng conversation between kung ano yung mas maganda, Laravel or Code Igniter. Yung Code Igniter kasi matagal na siya, and then some of the articles I've read and some of the studies I've read na nasurpass na siya ng Laravel in terms of performance, and then in terms of the libraries na kasama doon sa framework ng Laravel. However, meron naman tayong kailangan i-consider aside when you're building applications, we also need to consider other factors aside from performance. Kasi if you're starting, kung ako lang, if you're if you just started or kung gusto mo palang mag-aral about frameworks, ang medyo complex kasi if you start with Laravel. If you're trying to understand kung ano yung framework, if tawag ito, if you're just starting with frameworks, yung Laravel kasi medyo complex siya. So yung start mo is complex na siya, baka mahirapan ka to go on or to move on with your project kung nagsi-start ka pa lang. But if you're experienced enough or kung meron ka ng idea at may experience ka na, I would prefer doon sa complexity. Worth it naman siya if you try the complex framework. But if you're trying to build a project na mas mabilis, tapos beginner ka, and then you're trying to build a project faster, pwede mong gamitin yung CodeIgniter. So meron din tayong mga factors aside from performance na kailangan mong i-consider. So if you ask me, pwedeng Laravel, pwedeng CodeIgniter. So depende na lang dun sa take mo ng complexity of that framework.
Seeing no other questions, thank you so much, Ms. Audrey. And now we move to our next resource speaker who will be sharing her knowledge from the industry, and that's Ms. Joanne Laksamana.
Can you see my screen already?
Yeah.
Okay. So, good morning again. Today I will discuss about Git. So, among the technologies, I believe Git is a good tool and very helpful for us developers. For now, I will present a brief overview of Git and GitHub. So, what is Git? Git is the most widely used version control system. It is free and it's an open source license. We use mainly Git for collaborations and tracking file changes, something like that. So what is a version control? From the definition, it's a way of recording changes made to files by keeping a track of modifications done to the code. So ang Git is we basically save the initial version of our project or code into Git, and every time we revise it or update our code, we save it to Git again. So pale kada changes mo, save mo na naman siya sa Git, and kung meron ka na namang revision, save mo na naman siya. And since we are saving it to Git every time we change our code, we can look back at all the changes we have made over time. So siya yung tool na pwede mong matrack yung mga changes mo over time. This can help us understand what we did when, and also track down bugs or go back to previous version. Kasi for example, nag-keep ka ng mga versions mo and then nagkaroon ng nagkaroon ng bug, you can always look at your say for example GitHub and check from the different versions of what happened or who changes what file and something like that. Okay, so now that we know what is Git, ano naman ngayon yung GitHub? So Git is the tool that tracks the changes in your code over time While GitHub naman is a website where we host or place all our Git repositories. So ngayon nabanggit ko na yung term na repository. Ano ba yung repository sa Git? So repository is just a term used in Git. It is just basically the project or the folder or place where your project is kept. Now, bakit naman natin kailangan ng GitHub? Since it's online, we can use GitHub for collaboration. So once na na-upload mo na yung work mo doon, yung initial version ng code mo sa GitHub, another collaborator can make changes to the to your initial code and then share what they want to change and everything to that to your uploaded project. So ngayon naman is how do we install Git? For Linux and Mac operating systems, Git is already installed. So just open terminal and type git -- version to verify if Git is already installed to the system. For Windows naman,